Commander Tay stood at the viewing port, watching as the transport shuttle docked with his vessel. His four eyes narrowed as he observed the new soldiers who would join his elite interspecies unit. The Galactic Coalition had sent him 6 new recruits, 5 from standard worlds and 1 human. A human, Tay muttered, his secondary voice box vibrating with concern. Just what I need. The human, shorter than the others by at least 2 heads, walked with quiet confidence. He carried a standard issue pack that seemed too large for his frame, yet he moved as if it weighed nothing. Commander, Officer Min approached, offering a data tablet. The personnel files you requested. Tay scrolled through them quickly. The human's name was Han. His file contained less information than the others, with many sections marked as classified. All that remained visible was his combat record, impressive, if true. Later that day, Tay called the new recruits to the briefing room. He studied each face carefully, especially the humans. Han's expression remained neutral, giving away nothing. Welcome to Special Tactical Unit 7, Tay began. You were selected because your individual skills complement each other. Our mission requires stealth, strength, and adaptability. As Tay outlined their upcoming mission to an unstable moon in the Kellner system, he noticed the human taking notes on a small paper pad rather than using the digital system. Primitive methods, Han? Tay couldn't help asking. The human looked up. Paper doesn't run out of power, Commander. And it can't be hacked. Several of the aliens exchanged glances. The human's practical thinking was unexpected. After the briefing, the team gathered in the common area for their evening meal. As was tradition before first missions, the veterans began sharing war stories with the newcomers. Q, a massive reptilian soldier with iridescent scales, described his famous stand against 30 Vraxian raiders. My tribe honors me with these markings, he said, pointing to the ceremonial oils that made his scales gleam different colors. Jean, with skin that changed color with his emotions, told of how he had saved an entire settlement using only his natural camouflage abilities and quick thinking. Each alien soldier shared tales of bravery and skill, their stories growing more impressive as the night went on. Yet through it all, the human remained quiet, simply listening and occasionally nodding. What about you, human? Day, the youngest officer, finally asked. Surely your kind has tales worth telling. All eyes turned to Han, who seemed uncomfortable with the attention. Nothing special compared to your stories, Han said with a shrug. There was one time I was trapped in an Arctic research station after a storm hit. Had to survive there for 3 weeks until extraction arrived. That sounds worthy of telling, Tay encouraged, curious about the human's experience. Han sighed. The storm damaged our communications equipment and power generators. Outside temperature dropped to -40 degrees. I had to hunt local animals for food and maintain the shelter until help came. The room fell silent. You hunted in temperatures below freezing? Without specialized equipment? Sun, the communications specialist, finally whispered. Standard survival training for Earth-based operations, Han replied, clearly confused by their reaction. The cold was challenging, but manageable. The polar bears were the real problem. Polar bears? Un, the medic, asked. Large predatory mammals. White fur, excellent swimmers, can smell prey from kilometers away. They can crush a human skull with one bite, Han explained casually. I had to improvise some traps to keep them away from the station. The aliens stared at him in stunned silence. Even Q, who had faced the Vraxian raiders, looked impressed and slightly disturbed. And this is normal training for humans? Tay asked carefully. Basic survival skills, Han confirmed. Nothing special. Most of my unit could handle similar situations. After the gathering dispersed, Tay returned to his quarters and accessed the restricted database. He searched for Earth's classification and felt both his heart skip when the results appeared. Deathworld 7, extreme caution advised. The screen displayed images of Earth's varied environments, from scorching deserts to frozen wastelands, raging oceans to dense forests filled with predators. The gravity, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and indigenous life forms were all classified as severely hazardous to most sentient species. Tay looked at the human's file again with new understanding. Han wasn't just another soldier. He was a natural survivor, shaped by one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Perhaps, Tay murmured to himself, this human will be more valuable than I thought. The radiation storm had come without warning, forcing Special Tactical Unit 7 to seek shelter in the limestone caves of Praxis 3. Their mission to gather intelligence on suspected hive activity would have to wait until the deadly particles stopped bombarding the planet's surface. "Shelter scan complete," announced Dune, lowering his medical scanner. "This cave system is safe. The radiation cannot penetrate these walls." Commander Tay nodded. "Communications?" "Completely blocked by the storm," Sung replied, her antenna drooping slightly. "We're on our own until it passes." "How long?" Tay asked. "Based on atmospheric readings, at least 15 standard hours," said Day, the young science officer. A collective groan went through the team. 15 hours trapped in cold, damp caves with nothing to do was not anyone's idea of a good time. Han, the human, was already gathering small, dry plants near the cave entrance. "We should make a fire," he said simply. "The temperature will drop significantly during night cycle." "Fire?" Jin's skin flickered with alarm patterns. "Isn't that dangerous?" Han looked puzzled. "Not if you control it properly." He quickly arranged the plants and some dried wood in a small pit he had created with stones. The aliens watched with fascination as Han struck 2 stones together, creating sparks that caught on the dry material. Within moments, a small but warm fire glowed in the cave. "On my world, we would tell stories during times like this," Jin said, his skin now glowing a pleasant blue in the firelight. "It helps pass time and builds unit cohesion." Commander Tay nodded approval. "A good suggestion. Who wants to begin?" Jin volunteered first. As he spoke, his bioluminescent skin pulsed in rhythm with his tale about the cosmic dreamers who had supposedly granted his species their psychic abilities. "They came from beyond the stars," Jin said, his voice soft as his skin patterns shifted. "Beings of pure thought who saw potential in our minds. They touched the first of our kind with gifts that let us reach across space with our thoughts." Next came Q, who told of the great sky warriors who had taught his ancestors the sacred hunting rituals. His scales gleamed in the firelight as he demonstrated the ceremonial movements. Sung shared the legend of how her people had evolved from tiny creatures who could ride solar winds between worlds. Even the serious Commander Tay contributed a tale about the ancient guardians who had once protected his homeworld from a terrible plague. Finally, all eyes turned to Han. "What about humans? What stories do your people tell around fires?" asked Day eagerly. Han seemed thoughtful for a moment. "We have many. Some are very old." He stared into the flames. "There were warriors called Spartans who trained from childhood for battle. 300 of them once held off an army of tens of thousands." "A good fiction," approved Q. "Impossible, but inspiring." "Then there were the Roman legions," Han continued. "Soldiers who conquered much of our world through discipline and engineering. They built roads that still exist thousands of years later." "Your people enjoy tales of war," observed Tay. "We also have stories of explorers," Han added. "People who crossed frozen wastelands or burning deserts just to see what was on the other side. Men like Shackleton, who kept his crew alive when their ship was crushed by ice." "Your fiction is remarkably brutal," commented Dune. "Even your heroes suffer greatly." Han looked puzzled. "Fiction? These are historical accounts." The cave grew quiet except for the crackling fire. "Surely you exaggerate," said Jin, his skin now pulsing with doubt patterns. "No species could survive such conditions." Day, always curious, had been quietly checking his datapad during the stories. He looked up with wide eyes. "He's telling the truth. According to Coalition records, these are actual human historical events." The aliens stared at Han with new expressions. A mixture of disbelief and growing unease. You mean humans actually sent their young to train for war from childhood? Asked Q, his voice hushed. And your explorers willingly went into deadly environments, for knowledge? Sung added. Han nodded. Survival has always been a central part of human experience. Our planet shaped us that way. Commander Tay studied the human with new interest. He had known Earth was classified as a death world, but he hadn't fully understood what that meant until now. The stories other species told were about gifts from the stars or mystical beginnings. Human stories were about enduring hardship and overcoming impossible odds just to survive. Perhaps, suggested Tay quietly, you could tell us more about your world, Han? I believe we have much to learn. As the radiation storm raged outside, the aliens huddled closer to the fire, listening with rapt attention as Han began to explain what life on Earth had truly been like. With each word, their understanding of humans and their respect for Han grew deeper. The radiation storm had finally passed, and Special Tactical Unit 7 continued their mission on Praxis 3. They moved silently through the dense jungle, searching for signs of hive activity. Commander Tay led the way, his four eyes constantly scanning the environment for danger. Life signs detected ahead, whispered Sung, adjusting her sensor equipment. Multiple signatures, approximately 2 kilometers northeast. Tay signaled for the team to halt. Could be the research team we're looking for, he said quietly. Or it could be hive scouts, added Q, his scales darkening to match the surrounding vegetation. Han studied a small device in his hand. The pattern doesn't match coalition movement protocols, he observed. And there are too many for a standard research team. Tay nodded. We'll approach with caution. Jean, take point with your camouflage. Q and Day, right flank. Han and Un with me. Sung, maintain rear position and keep communications ready. They moved forward carefully, weapons ready. As they drew closer to the life signs, Jean suddenly froze, his skin turning a warning red. Before he could speak, the jungle erupted with plasma fire. Jean fell backward, hit in the shoulder. Commander Tay barely had time to shout ambush, before a blast struck him as well, tearing through his upper right arm. Hive warriors, shouted Q as he returned fire. At least 20. The unit scattered for cover as energy bolts tore through the vegetation around them. Un dragged the injured commander behind a large tree trunk while trying to dodge enemy fire. Communications are jammed, Sung reported, panic edging into her voice. I can't call for extraction. 3 more hive soldiers appeared from hidden positions, cutting off their retreat path. The situation deteriorated in seconds. Half the unit was wounded, and they were completely surrounded. We need to fall back. Day shouted, ducking as a plasma bolt narrowly missed his head. Han surveyed the situation with surprising calmness. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the terrain, the enemy positions, and his team's condition. Then he did something unexpected, he smiled. Commander, Han said, turning to Tay, with your permission, I'll take point. Tay, clutching his useless arm, nodded weakly. Do what you must, soldier. Han's demeanor changed instantly. He moved with purpose, gathering the team close. Un, stabilize the commander and Jean. Day, I need whatever combustible materials you can gather, plant sap, fuel cells, anything that burns. He turned to Sung. Your sensor equipment, can it detect density variations in the ground? Yes, but. Good. I need to know where the ground is soft and where it's solid. Han quickly drew a rough map in the dirt. Q, you're with me. We're going to create a diversion. The aliens exchanged confused glances but followed Han's instructions. Within minutes, Han had crafted several crude explosive devices using components from their equipment and natural materials from the jungle. These won't hurt them much, Han explained, but they'll create confusion. When I give the signal, we'll move in this pattern. He traced a zigzag path on his dirt map. Stay low, move fast, and don't stop for anything. What followed was unlike anything the aliens had ever experienced. Han moved with incredible speed and precision, placing his makeshift explosives at strategic points around their position. When he triggered them, the resulting chaos disoriented the Hive soldiers long enough for the team to slip through a gap in their perimeter. But Han wasn't finished. He led them to a muddy section that Sung had identified, where he quickly constructed simple but effective traps. "How did you know to do this?" gasped Day as they watched 3 pursuing Hive warriors fall into a hidden pit. "Basic survival tactics," Han replied, already moving to the next position. "On Earth, we study the environment and use it against enemies." For the next 2 hours, Han led the wounded team through the jungle, systematically eliminating pursuit through a combination of traps, ambushes, and misdirection. He fashioned weapons from the environment, simple but deadly, and anticipated the enemy's movements with uncanny accuracy. "How did you know they would attack from that direction?" asked Q after Han's makeshift explosive collapsed a tunnel onto their pursuers. "I didn't," Han replied matter-of-factly. "I covered all possible approaches. On Earth, we call it contingency planning." Commander Tay watched the human with growing amazement despite his pain. Han wasn't just fighting, he was thriving in this dangerous situation. Where the aliens saw only crisis, the humans saw opportunities. By nightfall, they had eliminated half their pursuers and put significant distance between themselves and the remaining Hive forces. As they took shelter in a small cave, Tay finally asked the question on everyone's mind. "Han," he said quietly, "where did you learn to fight like this?" The human looked up from where he was creating another weapon from vines and sharpened stones. "This isn't fighting, Commander," he said simply. "This is how humans survive. When you come from Earth, you learn these skills early or you don't survive at all." The aliens fell silent, finally beginning to understand what it meant to evolve on a Deathworld. The night passed slowly as Special Tactical Unit 7 took turns standing watch. Han insisted on taking the longest shift, despite having been the most active during their escape. The human seemed to require less rest than his alien companions, a fact that did not go unnoticed by Commander Tay. When morning came, Han studied a crude map he had drawn on a piece of bark. "The extraction point is approximately 15 kilometers in that direction," he said, pointing east. "Based on Hive movement patterns, they'll expect us to take the direct route through the valley. So we don't go that way," Commander Tay concluded, his injured arm now stabilized in a makeshift sling. "Correct. We go over the ridgeline instead." Han traced the route with his finger. "It's more difficult terrain, but they won't expect it." Jean, his shoulder wound treated but still painful, looked at the steep slopes with concern. "That climb looks impossible for those of us who are injured." Han smiled slightly. "Nothing is impossible. Just differently challenging." As they began their journey, the team moved slowly due to the injuries. Han took the lead, constantly scanning the environment for threats and opportunities. During a brief rest near a swift-flowing stream, Jin's curiosity finally overcame his caution. "Han," he asked, his skin pulsing with question patterns, "your species evolved on that death trap of a planet. How did you survive?" The human dipped his hands in the cool water and splashed some on his face before answering. "We almost didn't. Humans were prey animals first. We're not the strongest, fastest, or best armored creatures on Earth. We survived through adaptability. But the gravity alone on your world would crush most species," said Day, who had been fascinated by human physiology since their first meeting. "Which is why we have dense musculature and robust skeletal structures," Han explained patiently. "Our atmospheric composition forced efficient oxygen processing. Our planet's day-night cycle created predators that hunt in both light and darkness, so we learned to navigate both." Q, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Yet you seem so fragile compared to species like mine." Han nodded. "Physical strength isn't everything. Humans developed problem-solving intelligence as our primary survival trait. When you can't outfight something, you outthink it." Sung joined the conversation, her antenna twitching with interest. "Is that why you're always carrying that primitive cutting tool?" She pointed to the small metal knife Han kept in a sheath on his belt. "This?" Han drew the knife and held it up. "Yes. It's the most basic human tool. Our ancestors used similar tools made of stone over 1 million years ago. A human with a knife can build shelter, hunt food, create other tools, defend against predators. A sudden high-pitched sound interrupted him. Han immediately dropped flat to the ground, pulling Day down with him. The others followed his example just as energy bolts ripped through the air where they had been standing. "Hive scouts," Han whispered. "3 of them, using the tree line for cover." Without hesitation, Han slipped into the stream and disappeared beneath the surface. The aliens watched in amazement as the human moved underwater for nearly 30 seconds, emerging silently behind the Hive Scout's position. What followed was quick, efficient, and somewhat terrifying to observe. Han disabled all 3 scouts using only his knife and natural features of the environment, moving with a predatory grace none of the aliens had seen before. When he returned to the group, water dripping from his uniform, Un couldn't help asking, "How can you hold your breath so long? And how did you see underwater?" "Earth is mostly water," Han replied as if that explained everything. "Most humans learn to swim as children. As for seeing, I didn't need to. I could feel the current changes around their position." Commander Tay studied the human with growing respect. "You didn't kill them. No need. They're bound and unconscious. By the time they wake and free themselves, we'll be long gone." Han sheathed his knife. "We should move now." As they continued their journey, the aliens began to understand why humans were both feared and valued in the Galactic Coalition. They weren't just soldiers. They were survivors shaped by one of the harshest environments known. Later, as they paused on the ridgeline, Tay moved to stand beside Han, who was scanning the horizon with a small field scope. "My people have a saying," Tay said quietly. "Know your allies better than your enemies." I think I'm beginning to understand humans better now. Han lowered the scope and met Tay's four-eyed gaze. "We're not so different, Commander. All life adapts to its environment. Ours just happened to be exceptionally trying." "And that created an exceptional species," Tay replied. "I see now why the Coalition values human soldiers so highly." Han pointed to a distant clearing. "There's the extraction point. And it looks like we have a welcoming committee waiting for us." Through the scope, they could see at least 30 Hive warriors surrounding the clearing. "Impossible odds," murmured Sung from behind them. Han checked his makeshift weapons and smiled. "Impossible is just a word we use for things we haven't figured out yet. Trust me, this is where humans truly excel." The extraction point lay below them, a small clearing surrounded by dense jungle vegetation. And in that clearing waited at least 30 Hive warriors, their chitinous armor glinting in the sunlight. "Our ship will arrive in 1 standard hour," Sung whispered, checking her communications device. "The jamming field has weakened enough for basic signals." Commander Tay surveyed his injured team with concern. "We're in no condition for a frontal assault." "Then we won't attack directly," Han said, studying the enemy formation. "We'll use what humans call guerrilla tactics. Hit fast, move constantly, create confusion." The human quickly sketched a plan in the dirt, pointing out approach vectors and escape routes. "We don't need to defeat them all. We just need to secure a landing zone for our extraction ship." Q looked skeptical. "Even with your tactics, the odds are—" "Never tell me the odds," Han interrupted with a small smile. "On Earth, we have countless stories of battles won against impossible odds. This isn't even close to impossible." Han divided the team into pairs despite their injuries. "Tay, you're with me. Jean and Un together. Q and Sung, you take the eastern approach. Day, you'll operate our remaining drone as distraction." "What exactly are guerrilla tactics?" asked Jean, his skin pulsing with nervous patterns. "The art of the unexpected," Han replied. "Strike where they don't expect, disappear before they can respond, and always control the rhythm of the battle." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Han had each team plant his remaining makeshift explosives at strategic points around the clearing. When detonated in sequence, they created an illusion of a much larger attacking force. As the Hive warriors scrambled to respond to threats from multiple directions, Han led Commander Tay through their disorganized ranks. They moved like shadows, disabling enemies without killing them whenever possible. Why not eliminate them completely? Tay asked after Han knocked a hive soldier unconscious rather than using his blade. Unnecessary killing creates blood feuds, Han explained. Earth history taught us that lesson many times. The human fought with a mixture of brutal efficiency and surprising restraint. He seemed to know exactly how much force to use in each situation, conserving energy and resources like someone who understood that survival often depended on such calculations. After 20 minutes of coordinated strikes, the hive forces were in complete disarray. Han had somehow anticipated their every response, countering each move before it fully developed. "How do you do that?" gasped Day as they regrouped at the center of the clearing. "It's like you can see what they'll do before they do it." "Pattern recognition," Han replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Humans evolved to track prey and predict predator behavior. These hive soldiers follow predictable tactical doctrines." A sudden energy blast nearly struck Sung, who was saved only by Q's quick reflexes. A second wave of hive reinforcements had arrived, cutting off their position from three sides. "We can't hold this position," Commander Tay said, firing his weapon at the advancing enemies. Han checked the time. "Our ship arrives in 15 minutes. We don't need to hold forever." He pointed to a rocky outcropping at the edge of the clearing. "There. Defensive position with cover on three sides." The team fought their way to the outcropping, with Han repeatedly exposing himself to enemy fire to cover his wounded comrades. Despite being grazed twice by energy blasts, the human showed no signs of slowing down. "How are you still fighting?" Boone asked as he applied a quick field dressing to Han's burned shoulder. "The pain must be excruciating." "Pain is information," Han said simply. "Useful, but not always relevant." As the hive closed in, Han organized their final defense. He positioned each team member to maximize their strengths while compensating for injuries. When a group of hive warriors attempted to flank their position, Han single-handedly held them off with nothing but his knife and improvised weapons. Commander Tay watched in awe as the human demonstrated the full capabilities of a Deathworld species. Han's endurance, pain tolerance, and tactical adaptability seemed almost supernatural. Yet Tay now understood this was simply how humans were forged by a planet that tried to kill them at every turn. The extraction ship appeared in the sky just as their ammunition ran critically low. Han covered their boarding, being the last to enter the vessel as it lifted off. 3 cycles later, Commander Tay stood before a group of new recruits on the Coalition training station. His newly regenerated arm moved smoothly as he gestured toward the human officer standing quietly nearby. "I once believed humans were fragile creatures," Tay began. "I was wrong. Let me tell you about Deathworlders, and why you should thank the stars if you ever have one watching your back." The recruits leaned forward eagerly as Tay recounted their mission on Praxis 3. With each detail, their eyes grew wider, occasionally glancing at Han with a mixture of fear and respect. "Remember this," Tay concluded. "In the Coalition, we have soldiers from 1,000 worlds. But only one species evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day of their existence, and they still conquered it. That is the human element, and it cannot be matched." As the briefing ended, a young recruit approached Han nervously. "Sir, is it true that humans used to hunt predators for sport?" Han smiled slightly. "That's a story for another time. But yes, sometimes, on Earth, we were the monsters that other monsters feared. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses."